Jax's revenge domain.
Unreliable employees like you don't deserve a place here. You're fired. We've already cleared out your desk. The words glowed on my phone screen like a neon sign in a dark alley. I blinked twice, thinking the morphine was messing with my head. But no, the message was real. Vincent Hartley, my boss of 12 years, had just ended my career with a text while I was lying in a hospital bed, stitches still fresh from emergency heart surgery. My name is Colton Pierce. I'm 53 years old, and until that moment I was senior director at Hartley Analytics, a Chicago-based financial consulting firm. 25 years I'd spent building that client base. Late nights, weekend calls, missed family dinners, all to keep our biggest accounts happy and profitable. And now, in the sterile quiet of Northwestern Memorial's cardiac unit, I was being tossed aside like yesterday's newspaper. For a second, I couldn't breathe. Not from the surgery, but from the sheer audacity of it. Here I was, recovering from a triple bypass that had blindsided me during what should have been a routine Tuesday morning. The chest pain had hit me like a freight train while I was reviewing quarterly reports. Now, 3 days post-surgery, with my sternum still wired together and my heart learning to pump blood through new pathways, Vincent chose this exact moment to cut me loose. My wife Diana was downstairs grabbing coffee, worried sick about the medical bills on top of Jason's law school debt. Our son had just started his second year, and Sarah, our youngest, was finishing her marketing degree. At 53, I was supposed to be in my prime earning years, building toward retirement. Instead, I was staring at a text message that threatened to destroy everything we'd worked for. I was about to turn the phone face down when I heard a low chuckle from the bed next to me. The guy there had been wheeled in about an hour earlier, looking pale but alert, his left arm hooked to an IV. He tilted his head toward me with a knowing expression. "Bad news?" His voice was gravelly, weathered, but there was something sharp underneath it. I turned to look at him through the dim hospital lighting. Older than me, maybe mid-50s, silver at the temples, and a face that looked both tired and calculating at the same time. I'd noticed his admission papers earlier when the nurse left them briefly at the foot of his bed. Maxwell Donovan. The name had triggered something in my memory, but the pain medication had dulled my recall. "Just got fired," I said, my throat raw from a hospital bed. His eyebrow went up. Then he gave a short laugh that didn't reach his eyes. That takes a special kind of cruelty. There was something in his tone that suggested he'd seen plenty of cruelty in his time. I tilted the phone toward him so he could see the message. His eyes flicked over it once, twice, then his lips curled into something between sympathy and recognition. I watched him process the information, and I could almost see the gears turning behind those sharp eyes. "Well," he said slowly, settling back against his pillows. I thought this stay couldn't get any more interesting. The way he spoke, measured and confident, despite being in a hospital gown, snapped something in my memory. I'd seen his photo in Crane's Chicago Business, usually in articles about major corporate deals or industry acquisitions. Maxwell Donovan, CEO of Donovan & Associates, the firm that had been our biggest competitor for the past decade. His company had been circling our client base for years, trying to break into the sectors we dominated. And here he was in the bed next to mine, watching my boss's betrayal unfold in real time. The irony was almost too perfect to believe. I lay back, checking my pulse instinctively. The heart monitor next to my bed showed a steady rhythm, but I could feel my circulation changing, blood pressure rising despite the medications. Not from pain, but from sudden clarity. Vincent had always been paranoid about Donovan poaching our talent. He constantly reminded us that loyalty was non-negotiable. He'd even accused me of being too friendly with competitors at industry conferences. And yet, in his arrogance, he just handed me on a silver platter to the very man he feared most. "Looks like your company doesn't value you," Maxwell said, his eyes steady on mine, "but I suspect your clients might feel differently." His words carried weight, the kind that comes from decades of reading people and situations. His statement sent something like electricity through me. He was right. Over the past 25 years, I'd built relationships with some of the most demanding corporate clients in the Midwest. Relationships built on trust, late-night crisis calls, and countless small sacrifices that had nothing to do with corporate letterhead. Vincent thought he could simply erase me from those accounts with a text message and a cleared desk. But he didn't understand the difference between contracts and loyalty. He'd never learned that in business. People don't just buy services. They buy relationships, expertise, and most importantly, trust. You can't fire trust with a text message. Let me back up and tell you how I got here. 4 weeks earlier, I was sitting in Vincent's corner office looking at financial reports for Reynolds Industries. one of our anchor clients. The numbers weren't pretty, and Vincent was getting pressure from above to show growth that simply wasn't there. Colton, we need these Q4 projections to show 8% growth, Vincent said, not looking up from his laptop. His fingers moved across the keyboard with the kind of nervous energy that meant trouble. I studied the data again, running the calculations in my head. Vincent, the actual performance was 3%, maybe 4% if we're generous with the interpretation. Make it work. I can't fabricate numbers. Reynolds' CFO isn't stupid. She'll spot manipulation immediately. I kept my voice level, but inside I could feel my blood pressure rising. This wasn't the first time Vincent had pushed ethical boundaries, but it was the most blatant. Vincent finally looked at me, his face flushed with frustration. Then you're not leadership material. The board expects results, not excuses. This isn't about excuses. It's about fiduciary responsibility. I leaned forward in my chair. Vincent, Stephanie Reynolds has been with us for 8 years. She trusts us because we've never lied to her. If we start now, we lose everything. It's about keeping clients happy and revenue flowing. His voice had that edge it got when he felt cornered. Sometimes you have to massage the numbers to tell the right story. I stood up, feeling my chest tighten with something that would later prove prophetic. I won't falsify data, Vincent. Find another way. The meeting ended badly. Vincent's face had gone from flushed to white, and I could see his jaw working like he was chewing glass. The silence stretched between us until I finally walked out, leaving him staring at his laptop screen. I thought that was the end of it. We'd had disagreements before, heated ones, and we'd always found a way to work through them. I was wrong. 3 weeks later, I'm being wheeled into surgery for an emergency triple bypass. The chest pain had started during a client call and escalated so fast that Diana barely got me to the hospital in time. The surgeon told me later that 2 of my arteries were 90% blocked. Another hour, and I might not have made it, and Vincent sees his opportunity. No witnesses, no HR department, no chance for me to defend myself. Just a text message designed to humiliate me when I was at my most vulnerable. When my heart was literally held together with surgical wire and my family was scared I might not make it through the night. Now, lying in this hospital bed next to my biggest competitor, I realized something that should have been obvious years ago. Vincent hadn't just fired me. He'd freed me. Tell me something, Colton, Maxwell said. Somehow, knowing my name, though, I hadn't introduced myself. His voice was quiet, but it carried the authority of someone used to making decisions that affected hundreds of lives. How many major accounts did you personally manage at Hartley? The question caught me off guard. This was exactly the kind of information Vincent would have killed me for sharing with a competitor. But then again, Vincent had already tried to kill my career. Directly, 15 major accounts. Indirectly, I oversee relationships with maybe 30 more. I found myself being completely honest, something that felt both liberating and terrifying. And what kind of revenue do those accounts represent? I hesitated for just a moment, checking my pulse instinctively as I considered the implications of what I was about to say. About 80 million annually.
Maxwell's eyebrow arched slightly, and I could see him calculating behind those sharp eyes. And they trust you?
I thought about the late-night calls from panicked CFOs facing deadline pressures. The quiet thanks from executives after I'd helped them navigate crises that could have cost them millions. The personal relationships built over decades of consistent performance. Trust wasn't even the right word anymore. It was something deeper than that. They trust me, I said firmly. Maxwell set down the water cup he'd been holding and leaned back against his pillows. For a long moment he studied me like he was working out a complex equation, weighing variables I couldn't even see. The silence stretched, broken only by the steady beeping of our heart monitors and the distant sounds of hospital activity. Finally, he spoke. Colton, I'm going to be direct with you. Donovan and Associates has been trying to penetrate Hartley's client base for years, but what we've lacked isn't strategy or resources. It's someone like you, someone who understands both the numbers and the people behind them. My breath caught, and I felt my pulse quicken. The heart monitor next to my bed registered the change, beeping slightly faster. Are you offering me a job? Here in a hospital bed? He smiled slightly, and for the first time I saw something warmer behind those calculating eyes. Opportunities don't wait for perfect circumstances. You know that better than anyone. My mind was spinning. It felt reckless, almost surreal. Here I was, barely 3 days out of major surgery, being recruited by Vincent's biggest rival while hooked up to machines that were literally keeping track of whether my reconstructed heart could handle the stress. But deep down, I knew Maxwell was right. I'd never been just a cog in Vincent's machine. I'd been the engine, the relationship builder, the problem solver who kept clients coming back year after year. And Vincent had cut me loose without realizing I could power something else entirely. Still, the practical side of me, the part that had learned caution through 25 years of corporate politics, started listing the problems. Vincent will come after me. He'll claim non-compete violations. He'll threaten lawsuits. I touched my chest instinctively, feeling the tender spot where the surgical incision was healing. Maxwell nodded, unsurprised by my concerns. He'll bluster. Of course, men like him always do. But tell me, where is Donovan Associates headquartered? Milwaukee. And Hartley? Chicago. He spread his hands in a gesture that seemed to encompass all the legal complexities between us. Different jurisdictions, and more importantly, courts rarely enforce non-competes when someone is fired without cause, especially with a text message as evidence. You're free, Colton. Freer than you realize. For the first time since reading that brutal message, I felt something other than the constant tightness in my chest that wasn't related to surgery. Hope, maybe. Or recognition of possibility I hadn't dared to consider. I imagined Vincent's face when he realized his attempt to humiliate me had opened the door for his biggest rival. I imagined Brady Hartley, Vincent's nephew who'd been angling for my position for months, fumbling through client calls he didn't understand, trying to maintain relationships he'd never bothered to build. The nurse came in then, checking our IVs and breaking the intensity of the moment. But Maxwell's words kept echoing in my mind long after she left. The possibility he'd laid out wasn't just about a new job. It was about vindication, about proving that 25 years of relationship building meant something more than Vincent's corporate politics. That afternoon, I called Diana. Her voice was strained with worry about both my health and our finances. The medical bills were already starting to arrive, and my insurance would only cover so much of a procedure this extensive. "How are you holding up?" she asked. "I'll survive," I said, touching the bandage over my chest. "But Diana, something unexpected happened. You're not going to believe who's in the bed next to me." When I told her about Maxwell Donovan, she was quiet for a beat, then she let out a low whistle. If that's not fate, I don't know what is. I smiled for the first time in days. Maybe it was fate, or maybe it was just Vincent's arrogance finally catching up with him. That night, as the ward lights dimmed and the hospital settled into its uneasy quiet, I made a list on the back of my discharge papers. Names, phone numbers, companies, people who had trusted me over the years, depended on me, clients who wouldn't tolerate being handed off to Brady or some inexperienced replacement Vincent might hire. Stephanie Reynolds from Reynolds Industries. We'd worked together through 2 major acquisitions and a hostile takeover attempt. Laura Martinez from Midwest Manufacturing. I'd helped her navigate a regulatory crisis that could have shut down 3 facilities. Jennifer Walsh, who'd moved from Hartley to become senior project manager at her new firm, had always said she'd follow my recommendations anywhere. By the time I put that pen down, I realized something simple and undeniable. Vincent hadn't just fired me, he'd freed me, and soon he was going to regret it. The following Tuesday, I was discharged. The nurse helped me into my coat, the stiffness in my chest reminding me with each step that I wasn't ready for a physical fight, but my mind had never been sharper. Maxwell had been discharged the day before. Before leaving, he'd leaned over and said quietly, "I'll have my office call you. Rest for now, but don't waste time. Opportunities have expiration dates." Then he'd slipped me a business card, his direct line written on the back in neat handwriting. That sentence replayed in my head as Diana drove me home through Chicago's late February slush. Outside, the cold was bitter, cutting through my jacket and making my chest ache. But it woke me up in a way I hadn't felt in years. I felt alive again. Not as someone discarded, but as someone about to begin something dangerous and necessary. At home, I found a small envelope taped to our front door. Inside was a note handwritten in the same neat script I'd seen on the business card. "Colton, I meant what I said. Call this number when you're ready." Underneath was Maxwell's private office line. I sat at our kitchen table, the card between my fingers while Diana heated up soup in the microwave. The normalcy of home felt strange after the sterile intensity of the hospital. Part of me hesitated. Joining a direct competitor could burn bridges forever. Vincent would brand me disloyal. Industry rumors would spread, and at 53, starting over wasn't something I'd ever planned on doing. But then I thought about his text message, the cold finality of it, the complete lack of respect for everything I'd contributed over 12 years. He'd already burned the bridge. I owed him nothing. That evening, after Diana and I had talked through the implications, after Jason had called from law school to check on me, after Sarah had sent worried texts from her marketing internship, I dialed Maxwell's number. A woman's calm voice answered. "Donovan and Associates. This is Angela Stevens." I cleared my throat, still feeling the soreness from the breathing tube. "This is Colton Pierce. Maxwell Donovan told me to call." There was a pause, then her tone shifted to something warmer, more personal. "Of course, Mr. Pierce. Mr. Donovan is expecting you. Can you come in Thursday?" Thursday. Just 3 days after being discharged from the hospital. My chest still felt tight, and the doctors had warned me about overexertion. But my pride wouldn't allow me to delay. This was my chance, maybe my only chance, to prove that Vincent's betrayal hadn't destroyed me. "Yes," I said, "I'll be there." Thursday morning, I took the train up to Milwaukee and walked into Donovan and Associates' downtown office. The lobby was all polished steel and glass, everything about it radiating quiet confidence and success. It was newer than Hartley's offices, more modern, with an energy that felt different from the corporate stuffiness I'd grown used to. Angela met me at reception, her smile professional but genuinely warm. She was probably in her 40s, with the kind of competent air that suggested she'd been Maxwell's gatekeeper for years. "Mr. Donovan is waiting for you." Maxwell was seated in a conference room overlooking Lake Michigan. The view was spectacular, and I could see why he'd chosen this location for important meetings. He rose when I entered, extending his hand like we were meeting at a business dinner rather than after sharing trauma in hospital gowns just days earlier. "Colton," he said warmly, "I'm glad you came." I sank into the leather chair across from him, my pulse racing despite my efforts to stay calm. The familiar chest tightness returned, but this time it was anticipation rather than pain. "I don't want to waste your time," I said. "So let's be clear about something. I'm not here to gossip about Hartley or share proprietary information. I'm here because I know my clients. They trust me. And if Vincent thinks he can shuffle them off to Brady or someone else, he's in for a rude awakening." Maxwell studied me for a long moment, then nodded approvingly. "Good, that's exactly what I wanted to hear." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were contract drafts, compensation figures, equity options. It was more generous than anything Vincent had ever offered. But what made my throat tighten wasn't the salary. It was the title, Executive Vice President, Client Strategy. "This is more than I expected," I managed. "You've been underestimated for too long," Maxwell said simply. "I don't make that mistake." I signed that afternoon. My hand trembled slightly as I wrote my name, not from fear, but from the sheer weight of what it meant. At 53, I was starting over, but I was starting over with 25 years of experience and a network that Vincent had just handed me permission to use. The following week, I made my first calls. Carefully, quietly, I reached out to 3 clients I trusted most. I didn't try to sell them anything or badmouth Hartley. I simply told them the truth, that Vincent had let me go, that I was now with Donovan and Associates, and that I would still be there for them if they needed me. To my surprise, none of them hesitated. "If you're at Donovan, we want to be at Donovan," said Stephanie Reynolds from Reynolds Industries. "Brady called us last week trying to take over our account." We ended the call early. Kid didn't even know our project timelines or our regulatory requirements. Another client, Laura Martinez from Midwest Manufacturing, was even more direct. "Vincent's lost his mind if he thinks we'll work with anyone but you. Have Donovan send over a transition proposal." By the end of the week, 5 firms had formally requested contract discussions with Donovan and Associates. Nothing signed yet, but the momentum had begun in a way that felt both inevitable and satisfying. Vincent must have sensed something was happening. On Friday afternoon, my phone buzzed with a number I hadn't seen in days. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Colton." His voice was clipped, rushed, with an edge of panic I'd never heard before. "I hear you've been making calls." I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him uncomfortable, checking my pulse instinctively as I felt my blood pressure rise. "Vincent, you fired me. You told me I was unreliable. What did you think I'd do? Disappear? You're jeopardizing everything we built together." "No, Vincent," I said, my tone steady. "You jeopardized it when you fired the person your clients trusted most. I'm just giving them options. His breathing grew sharp, almost panicked. This is a mistake, Colton. You'll regret this. I ended the call without replying. For the first time in years, his threats didn't scare me. That weekend, I had a conversation with my son Jason that I'll never forget. He was home from law school for the weekend, and I could tell something was bothering him. "Dad," he said, finding me in the garage where I was pretending to organize tools. "Friends at school are asking why you got fired. What do I tell them?" I set down the wrench I'd been holding and really looked at my son. At 28, he was trying to figure out how to navigate a world where his father had apparently failed, at least by corporate standards. "Jason, sometimes doing the right thing looks wrong from the outside. I wouldn't falsify data for Vincent, and that's why he let me go. But how do I know you made the right choice? Watch what happens to the clients I was trying to protect. You'll see." He nodded slowly, and I could see him processing it. That's when I knew, regardless of what happened with Donovan and Associates, I'd made the right call. By the time I'd fully settled into Donovan and Associates, 6 major clients had made the jump over the course of 3 months. Each transition felt the same: polite, professional, but decisive. These weren't betrayals. They were business decisions made by people who valued relationships over corporate politics. The first official termination letter came from Reynolds Industries. Their legal team cited the key person clause in their contract and copied Donovan and Associates on the correspondence. It wasn't emotional. It read like weather, just facts and legal requirements. Vincent reached me on the phone one more time. His voice was brittle, desperate. "What are you doing? You can't just steal our book of business. This is theft. You fired me, Vincent. Clients are making their own choices. You think you can run to Donovan and gut what we built? I'll bury you in court. Then call your lawyer," I said evenly, "but they'll tell you the same thing mine told me. Relationships aren't property. You won't survive this, Colton. People remember disloyalty, then they'll remember yours too." I hung up before he could respond. My hands shook, but not from fear. His power over me had completely evaporated. 2 weeks later, Maxwell called me into his office with news I should have seen coming. "Vincent Hartley stormed our lobby this morning, demanding to see you," he said with an amused smile. Security had to escort him out. He was screaming something about you being finished. I looked down at the street from Maxwell's window. The city looked the same, but I knew everything beneath the surface had shifted. "He's unraveling," I said. "Completely. And it's about to get worse for him." Maxwell was right. Word spread quickly through our industry after Vincent's public meltdown. By month's end, Reynolds Industries had finalized their transition to Donovan. Midwest Manufacturing's board approved our proposal, and 4 smaller firms were preparing to make the jump. Then I got word that he'd been removed as CEO. The board cited loss of confidence in leadership and failure to protect client relationships. Brady had resigned the same day, leaving behind a trail of confused emails nobody bothered to answer. 6 months after that hospital text message, I was running Donovan and Associates' new Chicago office. Maxwell had kept his promise. He'd given me autonomy, respect, and the space to build something meaningful. One evening, I was working late when Angela knocked on my office door. "Colton, there's a call for you. Someone named Vincent Hartley." "Colton." His voice was unrecognizable. Hollow, stripped of all authority. "You've ruined me." I finally answered, my voice quiet but steady. "You didn't give me anything, Vincent. I earned it. And you tried to take it away with a text message while I was lying in a hospital bed." "Maybe you're right," he said, almost to himself. When I think back to that hospital bed, to the text that seemed to rip the ground out from under me, I realize now it wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. Vincent thought he was discarding me. What he really did was set me free. The lesson I carry is simple. Never let someone else decide your worth. Jobs, titles, companies can vanish in a moment. What remains is your work, your integrity, and the trust you build with people. Those are things no one can fire you from. Build your career on relationships and trust, not fear and manipulation. And never let someone's opinion of you become your opinion of yourself. That's worth more than any salary, any title, any corner office. That's worth everything. Sometimes the worst betrayal becomes your greatest opportunity. Vincent's cruelty freed me from a cage I didn't even know I was in, and at 53 I learned that it's never too late to discover what you're truly capable of when someone finally sets you loose. The people who try to destroy you often hand you exactly what you need to rebuild stronger. Vincent gave me the motivation, Maxwell gave me the platform, and my clients gave me the proof that loyalty flows to those who earn it, not those who demand it.